we can just have a quick chit chat about, because you're so interesting. I could do an episode on you, no?
Oh, that's flattering. Thank you.
Yeah, because you've many musicians I get on there, they're great at doing the music, but it's really good to have someone like yourself who's has a, I
Right.
mean, you also
Yeah, your
write.
podcast kind of calls for a very person with like a real set of skills.
I ask a lot. I expect a lot. I have high standards.
But I also assume that some people's untrained, that's part of the charm. Like someone who doesn't interview people, it could be bad or it could be kind of remarkably unrepeatable. Yeah.
I win either way. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a glass half full.
Yeah.
And it's also for fans of your band to hear you come into this setting is really interesting for them. So yeah, people get a lot from it
Cool.
because they. I guess people have heard you. You've been on a few podcasts. I heard you on a few, and
Oh yeah. I'm running my mouth all the time.
well, that's great. I'm going to make a coffee, and if you,
Yeah. I'll just start a monologue.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, but you're used to being interviewed, but you're a good interviewer. So you write, you're a true journalist.
Yeah.
This has come in handy because many of the guests, it's their first time. They're used to being interviewed, but
Right.
it's a different to be on the other side of the questions.
Yes. Yeah. And to like be a good listener and to not make everything about you and to not interrupt. There's some real tough parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have actually, am I right? You've already interviewed our guest.
No, that's tomorrow.
No, in the past.
Oh, you know what? No, it didn't happen. I wanted to, but
Okay.
I was running out of time with the book and we just didn't get to it. And uh which was it could have it wasn't essential, but it would have been nice, but it just didn't happen. So I'm glad I get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this for the book about Van Morrison's album?
Y- Yeah. And what that book is about a lot more than that. Basically it's a year in Boston with
Right.
Van Morrison and that album kind of as the main characters, but it really tells the story of the counterculture and the underground at the time for
Mhm.
1 year in Boston. And it tells about like the secret psychedelic history of Boston, where the first LSD hit in America was in Boston. So, uh, and Doblin's never talked directly about that. He always starts with Tim Leary,
Mhm.
and whose legacy he kind of wants to obliterate, which I also find super interesting. Um, but I'm curious to talk to Rick about how much he knows about Boston's kind of pre-Leary psychedelic history.
Mm. Yeah, you're really fighting for Boston. Are you going to run for mayor one day?
Well, while I wrote and released the book, the mayor was named Mayor Walsh. And
Mm.
there was a proclamation given the day the book was published. And I remember at the event just holding it up and saying, "Thanks, Uncle Marty," because probably everyone assumed it was in the bag, like some kind of unsavory business. But no, I don't think I could ever be a politician. But I've always lived here and I do love it. And so yeah, I do have a little bit of a streak of fighting for our uniqueness. I always said the book couldn't make the case that Boston was any cooler than people thought it was, but I can make the case it's weirder than people think it is or was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know who should be made to be politicians is people who don't want to be politicians. It should be one of those trick questions.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't want it, but then they'll just learn, you know, yeah. It's like, no, I don't. It's the briar patch. I guess it should be, it should be like, I don't know. How do you do it? Nominated by your peers, but now I'm thinking it through and then the peers will actually be a paid pack who,
Mm.
who put, yeah. How do you do it?
Yeah. Well, that's not one of the questions we'll be asking, but have you always lived in Boston? Yeah, for you're born and bred. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, raised in Dedham, Mass, which is the first suburb south of Boston. It
Okay.
really touches Boston, very close. So for people who want that distinction, I always give it.
And then
People who grew up in Southie, like, you grew up in Dedham.
yeah,
You know,
I've seen a lot of rough movies set in Boston.
yes. And that's another thing. It's like, that's like this one public perception
Yeah.
of the Southie tough guy.
Yeah, a very violent place.
Yeah. And I don't relate to that at all. And it's not anywhere near the whole of things, and maybe never was to the extent that it's been presented. But yeah, I mean, and Goodwill Hunting is kind of like the good, sweet middle spot of that, because I like that, because it's about like a smart kid who likes to read,
Who is also very violent.
who was also very violent. Because I did know people like that. Like I know people who were quite brilliant and would perhaps hide it or downplay it, and
Mhm.
to start a brawl at a bar on
Oh,
occasion.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Arguing over Nietzsche versus
what's that?
arguing about Nietzsche, some finer points of Nietzsche.
No, not that. No, I've never seen the exact argument that you see in Goodwill Hunting, but no, I mean, yeah, there is a certain. I guess it's a weird thing. There's a certain anti-intellectualism in Boston, even though that's like we're University City. And I think the only thing everyone agrees on is Dunkin' Donuts, and so we all meet there and get coffee. And now, where are you located, Jack?
I'm in Italy. Yeah, I'm English, as you can tell from my fantastic accent.
Where in Italy?
Underneath Napoli, about an hour and a half south, right in the south.
And have you always lived there?
No, my girlfriend's Italian, so she brought me over here about 10 years ago to sample the local delights, and I've never left.
And where did you grow up?
In England, near Cambridge, the original.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what time is it there?
What time? It's about 2:00. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. So midday.
Mm-hmm.
But what was I going to ask you? So, and you're most famous as being in Hallelujah the Hill. So that's your the
Well, certainly the longest thing I've done. Yeah, that's band started in late 2005, and we've released a lot of albums. I think we're up to 7 or 8,
Mhm.
and I've always stuck together, and we survived the pandemic as a band.
Mhm.
I don't mean to be glib about that, but I mean, but I just mean,
You mean survived physically or survived as a band?
well, of course we all survived physically, and that's the best thing to be thankful for. What I'm saying is, some institutions, some clubs, some bands, 2 years of shutdown, and it either, kind of made them hang it up or
Yeah.
whatever. And we found ways to stay busy.
Mm.
We learned to remotely record, and but yeah, I'm really grateful it still exists. It's a beautiful thing in my life.
But you are a Boston institution, though. You're one of the cult underground bands there. So
So they say.
yeah. Oh, was that the articles you wrote?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I'm just slipping this one into Pitchfork now. I just had it.
Oh, if only it was that easy.
No, but I really love your sound. It's
Oh, thanks.
and lyrically as well. So because we're doing this in this end of this interview, we also need you to do some extra work, and that's to write a song inspired by the conversation. So
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's an odd exercise, and I've never done that, and so I'm really interested to try.
yeah. So do you have a particular angle as well? Because I've been researching Rick myself, but you know him a lot more in depth than I do. It's a fascinating area. So I had also had on Carl what his second name? I had him on last week. His name will come to me.
Sure.
Carl Hart, yeah. Who's also now on the Maps
Oh, okay.
directors, I think.
All right.
So
How was that?
that was great. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not an advocate for psychedelics myself. I've never done it. I did mushrooms one time. Are
Uh-huh.
you without
Maybe advocate's a strong word, but I think that there is so much potential in healing and helping and making peaceful people with these um, substances. And I can also clearly see how um, their prohibition was very unfortunate, but kind of not a surprise with the way that
Mm.
Tim Leary and others just were like, everyone take it like candy. You know, um, I just see it. I first of all, I just can't believe that something exists that we figured out we can put in us and then it does what it does.
Mhm.
That's astounding to me. And then also, um, just it seems to be, I don't know, it seemed the problems of the world are so massive and so you don't even know where to start. But if this could be figured out how to safely help people, um, I really feel there's potential for positive change inherent in it. But I also understand it's dangerous.
Mm.
But so many things that have helped grow and evolve society are also dangerous. Fire, and cook your food or melt your bones. And a hammer you smash someone's head in or build a house. So um there's a PR angle too that has to be navigated, and I'm interested in talking to Rick about that. I think he's really good at that, and I'd love to know more about, because people, I think, a lot of people want to have him on as a nutty anecdote, or oh, is he going to say something crazy?
Mm.
And he's so good at not bullshitting, but also getting the message out and being very realistic about it.
Mhm. Well, it was the same with Carl Hart. He really takes apart people because he's done research into drugs. So he
Yeah,
has, and he knows it's doesn't you can't ask him a question he hasn't been asked about drugs. So
right,
yeah, so you really wouldn't want to go into an argument with him about it.
right,
Yeah. But
yeah.
did you have a transformative experience yourself?
Yes, I've had a few. Um, and I think, I forget when the headlines first came out that psilocybin, which is the active psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms,
Mhm.
Johns Hopkins headline that it seemed to help with depression. And I had already experienced that when I read that headline.
Ah.
Uh, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I'm not a one-off. It's it's a possible potential thing here. And now they have this data that perhaps microdosing
Mhm.
could, and it seems to potentially sidestep some of the negative byproducts of like SSRIs or antidepressants.
Wow.
Not that I think those stay around. I'm not like, you got to get rid of those. I see how helpful those are too. So not a hardlined extremist, but personally affected by it for sure. And artistically too. Um, I hate I hate when people are like, man, how high were you when you wrote blank blank or whatever, whether it's me or anybody who makes anything. And the truth is, I think yeah, pretty bad at being creative when you're in that state.
Oh,
But
really?
I think so. Whether it's marijuana or mushrooms or whatever, but it's about what you take back.
Right, right.
You come back changed or open to new things. And there's also this great saying in psychedelic culture. I forget who says it. Maybe it's Ramdas, Richard Alpert. But it's like the idea is once you get the message, hang up the phone. And then
Mhm.
the thing about that is, the goal is not to gobble mushrooms every day until you're nine. It's about recognizing when they've helped you and done their work. And and I'll talk to Rick about this, but one of the reasons perhaps pharmaceutical companies haven't raced towards these things is because you don't need to take them forever. And that's how they make money.
Mm.
And as conspiratorial as I'll get.
Yeah, we could go down the V road here, but we're not. That's actually what I said to Carl Hart because, he has all these proofs that, uh, all these drugs that most drugs are naturally derived, aren't they? I mean, even heroin and they come from plants, and the ones we're talking about. So,
Right.
there's some, even he doesn't advocate some of these ones that are made in a lab and,
Okay, sure. Yeah.
so, but, but, the thing I said is I can trust, you can't trust the corporations because, if you look at cigarettes, tobacco is a naturally grown, but the shit they put into those cigarettes
Right.
to make them more addictive, more. So imagine if if they were allowed to do these, and look at the opioid crisis as well. Once these pharmaceutical companies do get their dirty
Yeah.
little hands on it,
Yeah.
it's better being underground, safer.
Yeah. I just don't want people to go to prison for it. I mean, I
Well,
believe it's,
decriminalization, yes,
yeah,
versus
decriminalization.
legalization.
And then you can figure out how to grow
Yeah,
them yourself or
yeah,
meet
yeah,
someone who does. Yeah. Yeah. I know. You want, yeah, like you said, you want decriminalization, but not, you don't want, magic shrooms brought to you by Marlboro. And you buy it in a package at the gas store.
yeah, yeah. And so the kiddies can reach them as well.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I lived in Amsterdam for 10 years, and there's magic mushrooms and marijuana on every street. So
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, how are you going in America now? You're going through this legalization.
We sure are. Yeah. I mean, marijuana is now legal here in Massachusetts, and in many places, but not all of them. Um, and it needs to. I mean, I think everyone who's in jail for anything related to marijuana should be released immediately.
It's insane.
It's disgusting.
It's insane.
Yeah. And, what is it? I believe Colorado and maybe all of Washington or part of Washington state is in some way legalized psychedelics.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it's
Oh, really?
happening.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll ask Rick about that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. Again, the corporations run the prison system in America too. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Okay. I have done a lot of episodes about corporations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not good.
They're not good.
As far as being moral, ethical,
Hmm.
bastions of freedom, they are pretty terrible at that, but
Hmm.
they're good at delivering the same thing over and over again, many of the things that we need and love and or like. But beyond that, there's a big price to pay.
Yeah. 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 Well, hopefully we can put the worlds to rights with Rick later and see how he's doing the good work, isn't he? I mean, he's going into prisons actually, and I think
Yeah.
he is. I mean,
Yeah. It's very, yeah. We'll ask him about that for sure.
okay, great. Well, is there anything else people need to know about what were you working on at the moment? Is there another book coming on?
Well, so hopefully someday, there's been some twists and turns in the road to the second book, but that's okay. Um, it'll be there when I get to it.
What's the subject, or is that an exclusive? That
I can't talk about it yet, but well, because the first idea kind of had to be walked away from, so I don't want to talk about it because I could do it someday. And now I'm hammering out what it could be. But meanwhile, I'm doing a lot of writing and a lot that will come out this year, both music and nonfiction and a little bit of fiction. So I just stay busy.
okay? Yeah, yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
That's great. I love people like you because a lot of people I reach out to other musicians and they say, oh, I can't do it. I'm too busy. I've got an album coming out this year.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, if you want a job done, give it to a busy person. I've always
Oh
played
yeah, I
kind
see what you mean. Yeah. One of the interesting things, like growing up, like, trying to figure out how I could be a musician because it was something I was interested in. But kind of like a lot of the role models are like what they call slackers.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, these fucking rock gods, they just lay around and then shit out a brilliant riff and then they're on the radio. And what I immediately found out was either that's a total lie and they're just complete hustlers behind the scenes, or someone who is a complete hustler found them
Mm,
and was driving the cart. And so I've always, um, I've always been like very motivated and, don't wait for inspiration, make it come to you, and also learn every part of how you do this. So, I'll still walk around and put up posters even after all these years.
yeah.
'Cause, um, it's, all part of the same thing, I guess. Yeah.
And yeah, anyone who's ever done a tour knows it's not just drinking beer and playing a show. It's really.
It can be a lot of that. I will say it can be a lot of that.
Maybe I picked a bad example.
No, actually, there are different ways to approach tour. I mean, whether you're a little struggling band playing little dive bars or, a huge act, I feel like you can approach a tour as a ongoing party
Mhm.
or as a job or maybe somewhere in between and probably, figuring out the healthy balance is the only way to do it long term. So many people burn out from touring, and they lose their writing chops and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we used to tour a lot. Mostly I'm interested in writing new songs and recording them these days. But yeah.
I think we all go through that arc. Now I'm firmly lodged in podcast land, so I'm never going off the road again anytime.
Yeah.
COVID came along at a really great time. For me, COVID was the best thing that's ever happened to me. The lockdown, not COVID.
Really,
Sorry, let
truly.
me
Yeah,
rephrase
no,
that.
no, no. I know what you mean. And you have to always put that footnote in because
Mm,
you don't
yeah,
want to sound, you don't want to be insensitive.
no,
Um,
no, it was
but I
for
know
me.
what you mean.
Yeah, I'm in the countryside here, and I was, had started Podsongs, and it really made me. It was a life changing experience. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say a similar answer, because we had just put out an album called I'm You, and a lot of touring was being set up and was in progress. We were actually pulled off the road. Like,
Oh,
oh,
that.
yeah, yeah, like, we played till the day, like, we were declared a health emergency, essentially.
Wow.
But I was running I was so busy, I, like, found a third end to burn the candle at that time, and when I was when I was grounded by the pandemic, I quickly came to see like, oh, actually thankful that this put
Uh,
me in my house. I think I needed rest and I was like headed for something bad. So, same thing. And I got to all these things on my to-do list that were just going to stay there for years otherwise. So a terrible thing, but also, some silver linings too.
yeah, but so you moved from music and you're doing the writing. Are you because you did start studying filmmaking and you've won award for best video director as well for your own for videos. And are you ever going to go into filmmaking or screenplays, or is that
You know
logical?
what? Um, my parents would sure love that. Having paid for college for me. Um, but what I found out was right after I got out of college was that it was so much easier to gather the resources to make a record or write a thing. The amount it took to get a film together, even, on a student film level was so, I was like, this is for rich people. I was like, you need, this isn't going to be my best stuff if I'm constantly worrying if, X, Y, or Z.
That's a
So
stressful job. Now that is a real.
yeah. And so I do videos, which I just do for real cheap. And I would love to, during one of the pandemic projects I did was I wrote, something in a screenplay form. So
Oh, okay.
I got back to it and that felt good. I don't know if anything will come of it, but, yeah,
Yeah, because now there's all these film festivals for iPhone movies now.
I know. Incredible, right? Like
Yeah.
just yeah, the idea of what it took for me to make a 3-minute movie in the late '90s
Yeah.
and that anyone can do it with the thing in their pocket in such a short time is mind blowing to me. I really think, you and I, most people listening to this really live at this amazing
Mhm.
sped up intersection. Like I always tell this story to explain how fast things are moving. First tour ever musically, we had an atlas to get from city to city. Second tour, printed out MapQuest's directions from city to city that you planned out at home, you know?
Yeah.
Third tour, one of those Garmin units you put on the windshield, and it was very expensive, and you protected it like, oh, hide the Garmin, like, you know. And then the fourth tour, everyone has a magic computer in their pocket and can give you directions at any time. Like that's a lot for a brain to handle, I think.
That is wow. Because I wanted to also ask you because Hallelujah the Hills, when I was researching it, I found a film.
Oh yeah,
Is that how you named the band after the cult film?
absolutely. Yes. So I was shown that film at BU when I was studying film, a class called Films of the 60s. And I was just really delighted by that movie. I'd never seen anything like it. I love that it was made in New England, shot up in Vermont. And so we named it after the movie. Now, when I was writing the book, the movie is made by two Lithuanian brothers, Jonas and Adolphus Mikas. And Jonas Mikas is, you know, this legendary underground filmmaker. Sorry, my cat's coughing. It's all right, quiet. Legendary filmmaker involved with Warhol. He's in the Velvet Underground documentary quite a bit. Anyways, he intersected with the Boston story of my book. He knew the cult leader, Mel Lyman, who's a big figure in the book. And so I had to go, and when Jonas was still alive, I had to go interview him for this topic. And I was like, gosh darn, what do I do here? Because I need to keep journalistic integrity. But at a certain point, I got to tell this guy my band's named after a movie he made. So I just waited till we were kind of formally done with the interview. And then I said, all right, now I have to tell you something. And I pulled out one of our CDs or something. And he lit up so happy. And we shaded all these stories. And he was like, yeah, you'll, let's screen the movie and you guys will play. And I was like, I can't believe this. This is so magical. But unfortunately, he was very old. He died before we could do that. But just the fact that I met him and told him that we had got so much positive mileage out of this name that he was associated with, it was pretty meaningful to me.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, I think we better wait for this to come on.
All right. There's the preamble.
That was
Let's
the
go.
preamble.
Everyone suit up.
Let's get into the heavy stuff.
Well, Rick, I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and we almost crossed paths a few years ago when I was writing a book about Boston in 1968. And of course, that intersects with Leary and Ram Dass, which you speak a lot about. But I'm curious how much you know about Boston's pre-Leary psychedelic history.
Pretty Leary, not much. No, I do know that there was research in 1949 with LSD. I think that was here in Boston.
Yeah. I mean, it's the first, as far as I can tell, it's the first LSD dose in America.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Is that so? When you say, I love that you use the phrase, you want to bury the ghost of Tim Leary.
Yeah.
Is it especially meaningful for you to do this work here in sort of the same place where it started?
It is. Yeah. Because actually, I'm going to try to show you a photograph that you may have seen before. Here, it'll take me just a bit of time to get it. Here, I get this photograph. But I think when I moved from studying to be a psychedelic psychotherapist to where then I switched to studying public policy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of similarities between individual psychotherapy and then changing the mind of a culture into a healthy perspective relating to drugs and drug policy. So there's a lot of sort of symbolic behaviors that have to do with how culture changes its mind. And so starting research at Harvard, where Leary was, is really important part of that. All right. So I'm just going to share this picture.
Great.
All right. So this is just a picture of Tim and I. This is 1990.
Yeah.
And so this was a benefit for MAPS. It was pretty amazing. It was in Oakland, California at the Claremont Hotel. Ram Dass was there, Laura Huxley, Ralph Metzner, Leary. The three of them were together. Dennis McKenna, Andy Weil, Mark Kleiman from McKinney. It was a great event. Daniel Ellsberg was there of all people, but Tim had just finished his speech and it was time for questions. So I went to him and I said, what advice can you give us for trying to work with the government to make MDMA into a medicine? You've had all this experience, what is your advice for us who are those of us trying to work through the FDA and work through the government? And his first comment was, fuck the government. I said, I am so far past asking for permission for anything.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing it. And that's when he raised my hand like that.
Wow.
So
incredible picture.
Yeah.
How tangible is the Leary hangover, not only in the field, but in Massachusetts or Harvard in general? Do you feel like we're still dealing with the direct reverberations of that work?
We are. So for example, we're doing phase 3 research for MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD. And I, right now in Belmont, am about 1 mile or so from McLean Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard Medical School. That's where we actually started psychedelic research at Harvard back around 2006. And it was an MDMA study for cancer patients with anxiety. But that didn't proceed very far. And there hasn't been anything more at McLean Hospital. So when I was looking to set up phase 3 sites in Boston, I went to McLean Hospital. They said no. I went to MGH. This is now 2017 and 18. MGH said no. Cambridge Hospital said no. There was no place at Harvard where they would work on an FDA-approved phase 3 study.
Right.
And so we ended up working with Bessel van der Kolk in a private practice site. So he's our principal investigator of the Boston site. He wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
So there was, I would say, the ghost of Timothy Leary sort of haunting people, but that has since changed in those last few years. So now at MGH, there's the Center for the Neuroscience of Psychedelics. There would be, I think, more willingness at McLean or elsewhere if we wanted to do research inside facilities. There's MGH is combined with Home Base, which is the Boston Red Sox. They have a program for veterans with PTSD. They want to add MDMA into that. And I've connected them up with one of the main funders, the Stephen and Alexander Cohen Foundation in New York. They fund vets, but they also own the New York Mets. So we're talking about a New York Mets, Boston Red Sox, Harvard combination to do MDMA research in veterans.
Wow.
So if we've crossed that symbolic point. The other thing to say is that LSD was very important to start research with LSD because it was also connected with Leary, but also the quintessential bad psychedelic, the one that people are most frightened of.
Right.
So as part of the psychedelic renaissance, it was really essential to bring back LSD research, which we managed to do. One of the proudest things in MAPS history is that we managed to bring back LSD research in Switzerland months before Albert Hoffman and his wife Anita died. They could see the renewal of psychedelic research with their own eyes. Just the very, very beginnings of it, but they did see it.
Because he certainly felt conflicted about what he invented.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that. He wrote LSD, My Problem Child.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was glad he invented it. He thought it had incredible potential, but he thought the way it had been handled in society and, as a symbol of cultural rebellion, and all of that wasn't so great.
Excuse me, just 1 second.
Sure.
There's there's a paper near a mic somewhere. I think somebody.
Oh, I don't. Oh, maybe. I don't
Okay.
think so,
Just
but
somebody's moving something. If you could
ah,
get some sound. So
Okay.
sorry.
Rick, was there a turning point where that change started to happen, or when you saw it start to happen? For me, I remember, and maybe you can tell me what year this was, the Johns Hopkins study about psilocybin and depression. It seemed to me that was like the first headline I saw that sort of started to reverse the story.
Well, I would say for me, it really started back in around 2003, when science. There was an article in Science. Well, let me start by saying that Science in 2021, which is Science and Nature are considered the top scientific journals of the world, and Science published a list of at the end of every year what the top 10 scientific breakthroughs of the world are. And in 2021, there's always one winner and 9 runner-ups that are not ranked. And so one of the runner-ups as the top scientific breakthroughs of the world in 2021 was our MDMA study published in Nature Medicine, our first phase 3 study. All right. So why that was so satisfying is, first off, to be ranked as one of the top 10 scientific breakthroughs of the world was amazing. But also 20 years before, Science had published this paper that said that MDMA could hurt dopamine and could cause Parkinson's.
Whoa.
And it was accompanied by the editor of Science had an editorial saying that taking MDMA is like playing Russian roulette with your brain. You know, it's
Yeah.
this terribly brain damaging thing. Okay, so that study never made sense. Didn't seem right. It was in primates. Anyway, we criticized it with the letters to the editor. Eventually, it turned out that they spent a year trying to replicate the results, which they couldn't do. And then they autopsied one of the primates that had died from their administration, which we knew was a sign because we'd done other stuff with MDMA with primates where they didn't die. And they discovered that they had mistakenly given methamphetamine instead of MDMA to the primates.
I see.
And it was just a massive scandal. They should have known. They had to withdraw that paper. So that for me was around the same time as Peter Jennings had a documentary called Ecstasy Rising. And that was the first documentary that ever came out that had positive stories about MDMA from ecstasy users.
Right.
And it was so positive that members of Congress and the White House Office of Drug Control Policy contacted the president of ABC and tried to block them from showing this documentary. All right. So that's really the high watermark and the retreat of this fear-based propaganda about MDMA being, terribly brain damaging and it should never be researched. All right. So then that's sort of like the change towards the negative. The negative was kind of discredited. So then I think this study that you're talking about with psilocybin from Hopkins, that's starting to be this other side of where the positive is starting to be promoted. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that one was a big turning point. Then came several of our papers about our MDMA research, our phase 2 studies, and that started really changing things. And then the big change was in November 29th, 2016, when the FDA said that we could move into phase 3 studies.
Right.
So now we have the first psychedelic assisted therapy moving into phase 3. So I'd say those are the key points. And then also it was 2008 that we were able to start the LSD research. That was a really big turning point as well. Again, now LSD research, also research at Harvard. And that's where with our MDMA project. So that's where the stigma started really disappearing or mitigating in the new narrative. And now we've got like 400 for-profit psychedelic companies.
Right.
That's been another aspect of this transition.
And does anything about for-profit psychedelic companies worry you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think we need nonprofit public benefit psychedelic companies to keep the for-profits in check.
Yeah.
So, the traditional playbook in pharma is one of competition and overbroad patents to try to block other people. It's trying to create monopolies that may or may not have anything to do with original inventions, but have, use of the patent system to try to
Right.
claim certain areas of authority, and then try to use money that for-profits are have easier access to capital than nonprofits.
Right.
And so, yeah, you can use money for lawyers to try to drain other companies. So also, I think S-ketamine by Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, the way that was approved is another cautionary tale from for-profits, where if your mission is to maximize profits, not to maximize patient outcomes, providing S-ketamine the way they did without psychotherapy is a good way to do that, because the results fade. If there's not integration, you need more S-ketamine.
Right.
And they also went for S-ketamine, which is an isomer of ketamine instead of the racemic, because they could patent it.
Right.
But it's not better than the racemic, which is now generic, which is only a few dollars as compared to $400 or $500 for, racemic for S-ketamine. So the way it was done was suboptimal, an inferior drug, but because they could patent it, and without therapy because they don't understand therapy, and also because that way you need to go for more ketamine. So yeah, that's
always thought,
fantastic for-profit move.
I've always wondered if they'd be interested in all, companies would be interested in all, because unlike a lot of other medications, there is very often with psychedelics an endpoint where you don't need to take them for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
That's our goal. That is our goal, but that is not the goal of classic pharma. Yeah.
So if they're not checked, that's what they will pursue. Like, psilocybin a day keeps the doctor away.
Well, yeah. And not only that, but the money for therapists to provide therapy with the drug doesn't go to the drug company.
Right.
It goes to the therapist. So it's like meeting to them for their bottom line.
That seems like a terrible recipe. So I'm glad there's people up front thinking about how that can be.
And not only that, but I just heard some good news actually, that Janssen, the company that made it into medicine, is actually paying for a study combining S-ketamine with cognitive behavioral therapy. So
all right,
they're years late, and a lot of the therapy clinics or the ketamine clinics are going to be evolving into psychedelic clinics where therapy is offered, but the providers can decide, is it ketamine? Is it MDMA? Is it psilocybin? So there'll be customized, personalized treatment packages for each individual patient that may not be. So right now we have just ketamine clinics because it's the only thing that's legal, but those ones that are done by anesthesiologists that are not connected to therapy will wither and fade away. And the ketamine clinics that do provide therapy and eventually have trained therapists that can provide MDMA and psilocybin, those are the ones that are really going to proliferate the most.
Gotcha. Do you have any opinion on, it's probably, you could call it a fad at this point. Is microdosing something you're interested in or have an opinion on at all?
Well, I think it can be helpful for a lot of different things, but we're generally not interested because, first off, we want to get people free of drugs. Microdosing is a way for creativity, for energy, for inspiration. It can be helpful in low doses for people with depression or something like that.
Right.
But it'd be better, I think, macrodosing to get to the core of the problem, to work through it so they don't feel the need to microdose for medical. So I'm less thrilled about microdosing for medical than I am for beyond medical, personal growth, creativity, things like that. The other thing to say is that microdosing, nobody microdoses MDMA. There are a few people that have microdosed, not microdosed, but 10 or 15 milligrams of MDMA for pain on an ongoing basis, but not for the therapeutic use. And so the other part, though, is that it's not a microdose, but what we thought about was to do our phase 3 studies initially would be therapy with low dose MDMA versus therapy with full dose MDMA. And what we found is that the therapy with low dose MDMA, people did get better from where they had been before. But the low dose MDMA generally made people uncomfortable. It sort of activated them without reducing the fear enough. And so if you had people that got therapy without MDMA, they did better than people that got therapy with low dose MDMA. So, again, that's not quite microdosing, but I do think that there's a lot of benefits for microdosing. It's just MAPS is not researching that.
And is anyone associating that with therapy, pairing it with therapy officially?
Well, let's see. Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
No, but that is the kind of idea that's the closest. It's not microdosing again, but I'll say we did get a $12.9 million grant from the state of Michigan for a marijuana PTSD study in veterans.
Okay.
So cannabis for PTSD is about controlling symptoms. It doesn't get to the core of the problem. It needs to be used daily. If you stop using it, your problems come back.
Right.
But there's a fair number of people that would be fine, not doing the harder work in a sense of working with MDMA or psilocybin or ayahuasca, I think, to go to the depth of the problem.
Yep.
And so there will be a fair amount of interest, I think, if this study that we're going to do demonstrates that it can be helpful to some extent in reducing symptoms. So we'll know that in about 3 years from now.
Gotcha. One thing I wanted to ask you about, I write in the book I wrote a lot about Marsh Chapel, both with certain things that happened there historically, but also, of course, the Marsh Chapel miracle, which for people listening who don't know was an early Harvard-sponsored experiment with psilocybin, where some people got placebo, some got an actual dose, and people in that setting of a church, many experienced religious experiences, is how they would qualify.
Yeah.
Now, am I correct that you did follow-up interviews with some of those people?
Well, I did a 25-year follow-up, and I managed to identify 19 out of the 20 people. And I would interview those that are willing to be interviewed in person all over the country.
Yeah.
That was during the 1980s when I was at New College getting my undergraduate degree, and you had to do a senior thesis. And I wanted to do a senior thesis on psychedelics. And it was at a time where psychedelic research was completely shut down. But I realized that I could do this follow-up study. It was done in 1962 by Timothy Leary. Walter Pankey was it was his PhD. He was a minister and a doctor and getting a PhD. He loved credentials. He later worked with Stan Groff and others at Johns Hopkins at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, or the Psychedelic Research Center. But he died in a scuba diving accident in 1971.
That's right. Yeah.
And he would have done this follow-up, I'm convinced. But because he died and because of all the stigma of psychedelics, nobody had done it. So I needed to do a psychedelic thesis, or I wanted to do. And I realized that asking people to reflect on what happened before is going to be something I could get permission for, because I'm not giving a psychedelic. So yes, I did do that. And that really confirmed for me my theory of change as to why it's important to be working with psychedelics and bring psychedelic research back, because many of those people, so basically 9 out of the 20 had a sort of full or partial mystical experience, and 8 out of those 9 had the psilocybin.
Right.
And so, but what many of those people that had the psilocybin said is that this unit of mystical experience, the sense of being connected beyond your ego with all of life, with all of humanity, that had political implications, in that they proceeded to do more work in social justice things, in the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the women's rights, the environmental movement, anti-militarism. So that I think that there was this key to the 60s, in a way, in this Good Friday experiment at Marsh Chapel. Because what I felt was that a lot of the counterculture, you could say, was motivated by psychedelic experiences to not fight in Vietnam, to see through a lot of things. I mean, you had the, turn on, tune in, drop out kind of thing. But I think the lessons of the 60s is that there was this political inspirational aspect to egos, beyond ego kind of states, mystical unit of states, but also that there was a bit of a cover up in the Good Friday experiment, which was, the advocates, particularly Leary, to get back to him, and others, were exaggerating the benefits and minimizing the risks. In contrast to the
How did
government,
you figure that out, Rick?
well, what it turned out is that one of the people in the Good Friday experiment was, from the other people told me the story, that he had gotten so inspired by Reverend Howard Thurman, who was the incredible African-American minister, who actually had studied with Gandhi and was Martin Luther King's mentor.
That's
and was
right.
the one that helped bring nonviolence into the U.S. civil rights movement.
Right.
Howard Thurman, and was very interested in the political implications of the mystical experience. His sermon was incredibly motivating and dynamic. And at one point he said, you need to tell people there's a man on a cross, this kind of evangelical part of it. And one of the people said, yeah, I do need to do that. I need to do that now. And he ran outside, and he was under the influence of psilocybin. He's running down Commonwealth Avenue in front of Mars Chapel, is a very heavily trafficked road.
Right.
And Houston Smith and Walter ran after him.
Right.
And along with Walter Peggy, and they captured him, and he didn't want to come in.
Right.
Died anymore. And so they gave him Thorazine. They gave him a shot of Thorazine.
Yep.
And then they tranquilizer, sort of major antipsychotic, and they brought him inside, but they never mentioned that.
Really?
Not at all. That was a completely buried.
Didn't he rip up a mailman's letter or something? He grabbed something from a mailman and ripped it up.
Yeah, he was definitely in need of care
Right.
at that point. To not kill himself in traffic or anything like that. So
they just tossed that data out.
Well, they just never mentioned it at all, and you would not read about it. And then over time, it sort of became that everybody that had the psilocybin had the mystical experience, which is not the case either. 2 out of the 10 didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
There was that kind of exaggeration of the benefits, minimizing the risks.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really justified in their minds, I think, by the government doing the opposite, and then not only not only denying the benefits, but then suppressing research into the benefits for multiple decades, not just in the US, but around the world.
Right. Do you have any kind of what if scenario? Have you ever played out or thought about, let's say it was handled better, they did a better job at this, and experiments never were banned and continued. Where do you think we'd be right now?
Well, I do often think about that. And so, if there had not been this backlash in the 1970s, all right, there was so much psychedelic research, so much interest in it, that we would be, my theory is that we would be a much more mentally healthy country and world than otherwise. So this goes back that far, but let's just say 1985, when MDMA was made into criminalized.
Yep.
The medical use of MDMA was criminalized in 85. When we just think of the number of suicides just among veterans that have occurred since then, and how it seems that the therapy that we're doing with MDMA can help prevent suicides. The first person at the Bronx VA who received MDMA, the first veteran, had a very positive outcome and felt that it could have a role in reducing veteran suicides.
Yeah.
And many of the vets in our studies have said that. So I think that, we would have psychedelics incorporated into our mental health right now. We would have less addiction.
Yeah.
Ibogaine is incredible. Ibogaine was, it's not a drug of abuse, but it's got unique properties to help people with opiate addictions, to go through withdrawal, and to bring material up to the surface about issues that they're not working on that drive them for running away. So in a year where we had over 100,000 people die of overdoses from opiates, often mixed impure with fentanyl, we've got a drug that still is not available. It's illegal in the United States, but it's legal in Canada, legal in Mexico, legal in England. Or I should say better, it's not criminalized in those countries. I think we would have vastly better mental health, reduction of, overdose deaths, but also what about the whole link to the war on drugs? The suppression of the benefits. So what we see with medical marijuana is that changed people's attitudes about whether marijuana should be legal or not.
Right.
All right. So let's talk about the harms of the drug war and mass incarceration and the racist nature of the drug war. If we had incorporated psychedelics into our science and medicine in the 70s, I think the rhetoric of the drug war that was used by Nixon, used by Reagan, to whip up fear, to go after crack, super predators, crack babies, all this stuff that was not based on science.
Right.
The damage of the drug war and the number of murders, let's just say, of the cartels. We don't see that with alcohol now. We don't see that with marijuana in the United States. So the vast amount of violence, crime, I think it would have been transformative to our culture. Would we be in such denial, so many people, about climate change?
Right.
Because people have a hard time dealing with things that are difficult. And you dissociate. That's a classic strategy for when you're traumatized. You dissociate. It's not really happening. You're not really there. So a lot of people are dissociating or not dealing with the realities of the challenges that we're facing on a global basis, both about vaccinations, about the pandemic, about climate change, about militarism, about authoritarianism. I think psychedelics, if they had been incorporated into our society instead of suppressed, that we would be, well along to what I've been calling a spiritualized humanity.
Yeah.
That's really the end goal for MAPS. Mass mental health equals spiritualized humanity, equals where we know our place in the universe, but also we know that we have more in common with other people than separate. So I think it's one of the tragedies of the 20th century was the criminalization of psychedelics research and psychedelics.
And when you say a spiritualized society, can you speak a little more about that? Because I think some people hear that and think, oh, well, that's a utopian far out vision.
It is a utopian far out vision. Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, lean into it. I mean,
Yeah. Well, with weapons of mass destruction that we have, with the fact that mutual assured destruction is what's kept us, from blowing up the world with nuclear weapons. But that implies, it requires people that are, at least to some degree, not suicidal. So what have we got about the leadership of Russia, the leadership of North Korea? They don't care about human life.
Right.
That at some point they might not even care about their own lives. So we are on a precipice. Albert Einstein said the splitting of the atom has changed everything except our mode of thinking, and hence we drift towards unparalleled catastrophe. What shall be required if mankind is to survive is a whole new manner of thinking. I think that's this mystical sense of how we're all in this together, and that's the new manner of thinking. That's where psychedelics and other techniques can move us in that direction. So the utopian future may be the only future. If we may destroy ourselves if we don't reach this kind of spiritualized humanity.
So this is, for you, this is beyond helping individual people with deep pain. It's about saving humanity.
Yeah. So 50 years ago, 1972, when I was 18, that's when I decided to devote myself to psychedelics.
Yeah.
And that was for political reasons. It was more than it, it wasn't so much therapy. It was, again, this idea that if, being influenced by the Holocaust, influenced by how people can dehumanize others, what is the antidote to genocide? It's to see that people are brothers and sisters, that how do you do that to your own family? So that the political implications of the mystical experience are what made me 50 years ago focus on psychedelics to bring that back. I also thought that, they were tremendously helpful in clinical conditions, but also in personal growth and religion. The roots of Western society, the Greeks, the Eleusinian mysteries had a psychedelic component. So we're not talking about mainstreaming psychedelics or integrating psychedelics into Western culture. We're talking about reintegrating after the power structure, after the church wiped it out so that they could be an intermediary between people and spirituality for domination and control. So I think that this larger mission, which therefore means that MAPS doesn't just do drug development and to make MDMA into a medicine for clinical conditions, we also work on drug policy reform because we need to get these experiences into widespread application, not just for people that have a diagnosable disorder, but the medicalization and the science through the FDA is the key lever to change people's attitudes after, billions of dollars of misinformation in, the DARE program and the Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
Yeah.
The overhype of government-funded scientists. So how do we break through all that? It's medicalization.
Now, I'm a child of the DARE program. I went through it in elementary school. And I remember even as a young person who had never had any involvement with any substances, whenever they would bring up the subject of why people take drugs, peer pressure was the only answer they had. And that just struck me as so false. And it continues to strike me as so unusual that we never talk about why people take any drugs.
Well, I end up having a fair amount of conversations with police, where we have to get, Schedule I drug licenses for other researchers. And they have no idea a lot of times why people take drugs because all they have heard about is, oh, you're going to go crazy or you're going to do brain damage or there's nothing positive in it. It's all about running away. And so I often find myself trying to explain to police and others why people would do these things. And they're interested to know because their education or their misinformation and miseducation has left them clueless about why people would do this.
Right. Now, beyond your work and, the political activism and the regulation activism, like, for instance, the 60s had not only Leary and that movement, but also cultural artistic heroes pushing the same thing. John Lennon, Paul McCartney. I took LSD. It opened up my creativity. Is there anyone today who is in your opinion, a good spokesperson for, the goal of MAPS per se?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you somebody who's a bad spokesperson, first off, which is Will Smith, because he has been using ayahuasca and has talked positively about his use of psychedelics.
Oh, man.
And
Listeners, we're 2 days after the slap.
Yeah.
Just to,
yeah. I mean, and letting his anger get the better of him and thinking about how that's an appropriate thing to do in front of a billion, whatever, how many people are watching or, who knows how many, but lots.
Right.
It was, so that's a bad example.
Yeah.
But a good example is Michael Pollan.
Okay.
And I think through his book, How to Change Your Mind, and there's a Netflix documentary coming up about that in July. But I think that the main thing why Michael Pollan is such a good contrast to Timothy Leary, who we started talking about, is that Timothy Leary talked about tune in, turn on, drop out. The thing about Michael Pollan is that he was a well-regarded author about food, about health. Then he started, experimenting with psychedelics. But the thing was, he was Michael Pollan before he started experimenting with psychedelics. And then he was Michael Pollan afterwards. He didn't get divorced. He didn't go to India and wear beads and start meditating in a cave. He demonstrated that you can have these experiences and stay within the cultural frame and just be more open, more educated, different kind of attitudes, but that it doesn't require this dropping out, this counterculture. So I think Michael Pollan, we like to call him the pollinator. and that he has, very, very much
Right.
changed a lot of people's minds and has done a lot of good. So I think, Roland Griffiths is a good spokesperson. He's a sober kind of a guy, but
Yeah.
Roland Griffiths, who did the research at Hopkins, he was the leader
Okay.
of research, and Bill Richards, who's in his 80s, an early LSD researcher, who he worked with Walter Pankey. He wrote the first paper with Walter, some of the first papers on the Good Friday experiment. And he's the longest lasting psychedelics therapist.
Right.
Yeah, because Stan Groff was in his 90s, or 90, but Stan does not do psychedelic therapy now, but Bill Richards still does.
Right.
So there are spokespeople that I think are excellent.
Right. Paulin's a great example because he's a writer, but can you think of any? I'm thinking of artists, musicians, painters.
Sting is a good one. He does. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Incredible.
Oh, yeah. Paul Simon.
Oh, wow.
And they both done incredible work with ayahuasca and other things, and they've written about it and spoken about it, made songs about it. And so, yeah, there are a lot of artists like Casey Musgraves. She's incredible. She talks about LSD, inspiring a bunch of her songs.
Wow. I didn't.
Yeah, there's
I'll look that up.
Yeah, there's a movie that people want to see, Have a Good Trip.
Yeah.
It's about celebrities in entertainment who talk openly about their use of psychedelics. So yeah, there's a lot of artists who are open about this.
And doing a better job than recklessly saying, everyone take this. And
and sort of what I think the most important thing they're doing that's so important is they're not saying that the power is in the drug. Again, it's in the relationship that you set up with it, the context, how you do it.
Yeah.
That they're talking about doing it in ceremonies or doing it in therapy settings or being careful when you're doing it. It's not just pop a pill and all of a sudden you're more creative.
Right. We just have a few minutes, Rick. And so I want to ask you just one or two more questions. I'm curious about, there's rigid restrictions about who can take your experiments. Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of the idea behind that, I feel is this can't work for everybody, or, you know what I mean? Like at a certain point, what if this is widely accepted as a miracle, substance and process, but some people just for pre-existing mental conditions, will they feel left out, prohibited from taking it? Where do you see?
Yeah. So first off, I think also one of the problems of the 60s was this mythology of one dose miracle cure. You're enlightened, you're cured of this or that. So we don't say that it's a miracle, but I think the challenge, because it's therapy that the psychedelics make more effective, and it's intensive psychotherapy. So it's very much initially more expensive than just giving somebody a daily pill to take.
Right.
So in order to justify the expense, we mostly have to prove that it's durable in a substantial number of people. But the other thing that we need to do is to figure out how to decide ahead of time, if we can, who are going to be responders and who are going to be non-responders.
Right.
But we do not now have that information. We cannot predict ahead of time who's going to respond, who's not going to respond.
Right.
And in our initial phase 3 study, 88% of the people were either 67% no longer had PTSD at the 2-month follow-up. The other 21% had clinically significant reduction of PTSD symptoms, even though they still had PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And if they would have had more time or a fourth session, they might. So I think this question about who's going to respond, who's not going to respond is the big issue.
Right.
Borderline personality, people with difficult attachments, they tend to need more sessions.
Right.
But they're not necessarily non-responders. They just need more sessions.
So and a collaboration with the substance and humans is the recipe, really.
Yeah.
Not everyone can work alone and be as powerful.
Right. It's if you look at the MAPS logo, have you seen the version that Alex Gray has made of the MAPS logo?
I'm not sure I have. I know Alex Gray.
Okay, let me try to share my screen there. It'll just take me just a second.
Sure.
Um, because it's really quite beautiful what he's done with this Maps logo.
And for listeners who don't know, Alex Gray is a famous, would you call him a psychedelic visual artist?
Yeah, 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 very very much so. And the the reason that I'm going to show you this is that um, it's about it's a psychedelic image. Okay, so let me just share the screen here. Let's see here. Okay, so this is Alex Gray's interpretation of the Maps logo.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that the hands are first. It's humans helping humans. The psychedelic eyes, swirly things in the background is in the background. So what we're emphasizing here is that the key part of this is the human relationship that the person and the therapist, the therapeutic alliance. That's the key factor for whether people can get better or not. The psychedelic is intentionally in the background, not in the foreground.
Love it.
So that's that idea.
Well, it's a beautiful image and it's a beautiful mission, and I'm thankful for your time, and I'm going to write a song about this conversation we just had.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. How long is your process? When do you think you'll?
Well, Jack and I need to talk about that, but we'll figure it out, and I can't wait to share it with you.
Okay, and then we'll share it through our social media, and everybody,
Right.
we'll let hundreds of thousands of people know about it.
Rick, I appreciate you, all the work you do, and for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
Right, it's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed your questions.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, bye, Jack.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Jack, do you want me to stay on?
Oh yeah, let's have that was great. Wow. You really
Oh man, I'm so embarrassed I was late. But I pulled it together, I hope.
yeah, wow, you've really raised the bar in the standard of interviews, I have to say.
What, really?
Yeah, you did a great job. You're so relaxed, so natural. Yeah, it's
Okay.
tell you've done many interviews before.
Okay, good. I like that guy a lot, and he delivered. He was a great guy.
Yeah, the questions just seemed to flow from you. Like you didn't even have them written down.
No, I was looking. I had some written down here. You just couldn't tell.
Okay.
But then I abandoned a lot of them because things he said made me think of other things, and so
yeah, no.
that felt natural.
Yeah, you just really flowed. Really, I mean, it raised the bar because I'm getting so many musicians on, and they're so used to being interviewed, but it's a skill to do the interviewing. So I think I have to. Yeah.
Do you remember Saturday Night Live skit where Chris Farley interviews Paul McCartney?
No, I haven't seen that one.
It's called The Chris Farley Show. I'll send you the clip. It's a joke about being a terrible interviewer, and he's like, when you wrote like Let It Be, like that was awesome. And it's not a question, and Paul just has to be like, yeah, it was pretty awesome. It's very funny.
It's really Paul McCartney obviously in this sketch.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. But Rick's question, the timeline for what's next.
Yeah.
How much time do I have? What do we do? What do you want?
Well, it depends. Are we going to use MDMA? Are we going to use psilocybin? Or are we going to, what are we going to take to write the song?
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll have to decide.
Do we want a fast song, or should we just go slow? Should we just do downers, uppers? I mean,
right. I think it's each of our choices.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I forget refresh me what the literal next steps are. Like, do I write alone off camera, like and bring something to?
Yeah, let's because now we're up, we're literally up after this, so we go away and write something, and because this is the free part of the process. No, we're not, we come up with the best song possible, so come up with things back and forth, and we can always have another Zoom call, do some collaboration as well if necessary.
Yeah.
And then you go then we can, I have a group of musicians here in Italy. You can record something to a click. We can work on it, or you can work on it as well.
Okay. Could my band do a finished version, or is that not the idea?
Oh, that would be great. I mean, it's less work for us, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think I would prefer that. Just because it's going to be fun to take this through every part of the experience.
I'm completely happy with that. Yeah.
So why don't I set myself a goal of demoing something
Mhm.
that I can let you hear within the next 2 to 3 weeks. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's good. I think the sooner the better, because the longer you leave it, it does tend to,
That's true. Yeah, I might jot some down or start it today,
yeah.
and then we'll proceed.
Okay. Yeah. Super.
Thank you for being persistent, and sorry it took me so long.
No worries. It's been worth it. It's really great. And I can't wait to hear the song, and it will magically appear after the conversation. So
Right.
people don't, we should really do a whole documentary about the work that's going into this song. But
No, I don't know. Well, Jack, if I film myself trying to write it, is that interesting to have?
that's good for social media as well, for putting things out there. Because like if you tag Rick, then everything, he's gonna reshare everything, hopefully. So we want some anticipation for the song,
Right.
not just it appears magically. So yeah, definitely do that. And maybe we could do like an Instagram live when the song comes out and on your channels or something like that, just to, definitely tag photos of the lyric, put photos when you're writing the lyrics, and
Oh, yeah. Okay.
drag out the
The
whole,
whole package.
yeah, definitely. I just
Right.
won't include it in the podcast because it's too much for people to listen to.
Oh, I follow. Totally
Yeah.
follow. Okay. Yeah, so the next thing people would hear after that interview would be, and here's the finished song.
No, I'll cut a little bit of this conversation in as well.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, just the part where we say goodbye and good luck and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Jack.
No worries. I really mean it. You did a fantastic job of,
You too.
yeah.
Thanks for stalling while I stumble around and got to. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
We've been backstabbed, betrayed, butchered, and splayed on the altar of the way it's always been done. It's American, man, watch your funerals span the bulk of the calendar year. And you can shake your head and say it's not right. Spend all your nights in electronic fights, but you know in the end there's no way to defend the way we do nothing at all. Waking up is a trauma, and a low's turned to drama. You dissociate from every nuclear thought. Total lack of conviction with a bullshit addiction. It's enough to forget all we've got. And all we've got could someday be enough. A spiritual world where we lean into love. Well, hey, I get it, man. You're not sure of the plan as you harangue me holding the beer. The best in us was on the cusp of true manifestation. Could we take the leap into the deep and find the softest landing? And besides, what have we got to lose? If we could stay like this or get better, what would you choose? I just want my friends to get free. I just want my friends to get free. just want my love to get free. I just want my love to get free. I just want the pain 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 to get